but the major influence that Mises had was a private seminar which he gave every week in the Department of Commerce offices, Chamber of Commerce offices, and it was a magnet for all the top students in Europe, all the top young social scientists and economists and philosophers in Europe, and even the United States and England, came to this because this was the great center of research from the early 1920s until 1934. And he tried to replicate this with us in the United States. And unfortunately, I felt very sorry about it because the caliber of the students there was not exactly up to Vienna par, to put it very, very kindly. He did totally uncomplaining, he was pressed on and did his very best to stimulate, as I said, research in students. And this was a period from when he was here from the mid-40s until he died in 1973. It was sort of like, as I said, a candle in the darkness. There were very few Austrians, very few free market people. Even when the free market became more respectable, there were almost no Austrians. But he, as I say, pressed on. He was extraordinarily productive and extraordinarily cheerful in this whole process. When he died in 1973, just coincidentally, the next year, that was the year 73, 74 of the great collapse of Keynesianism, because that was the first year when the process of so-called stagflation or inflationary recession became evident. It happened before a little bit, but it wasn't evident. All of a sudden, 73, 74, there's an inflation, 13, 14% inflation, so-called double-digit inflation. And at the same time, it was a big recession with unemployment and bankruptcies and all the rest of it. What are you supposed to do about this? Keynesian doctrine, of course, is very simple. I mean, the equations are complicated, but the practical conclusion is very simple. The government is the great macro steering wheel, or whatever. The economic system is wonderful in the micro sense, but in the macro sense, it's totally without an anchor, without a rudder. It needs a great helmsman, namely, of course, the government. Provided the government is steered by Keynesian economists, that's, of course, a key. And looking at the controls and the indicators and statistics, if the Keynesian economist finds that there's a recession and prices are falling and all that, you pump in spending, usually, of course, meaning increasing government budgets. If you find there's a boom and there's prices going up and so forth, and inflation, then you take out spending. Mainly, almost always, of course, by increasing taxes. Never by cutting the government budget, by the way. This is part of the Orwellian memory hole of original Keynesianism. So you increase taxes by sopping up, quote, excess purchasing power. In other words, we have the excess purchasing power after the government has already inflated the money supply, and we've all gotten it. Then we become excessive, and they have to sop it away again. It's sort of a 1-2 punch to the economy, to the people. So here we have a situation, however, where two things are happening at once. Inflation, prices are going up, and yet there's also a recession. What are you supposed to do? Do you pump in spending or do you take it out? You can't do both at the same time. Despite all the equations and computer or whatever, you can't pump in spending and take it out at the same time. So they were finished. I mean, essentially, Keynesian has been dead from the neck up since 1974. It doesn't mean they quit. Nobody ever quits. It's one of Rothbard's laws of sociological laws. I have a whole bunch of them, which have evolved over the years. And one of them is nobody quits. Now, it's not an apodictic law like praxeology. Once in a while, somebody does quit, but it's a tremendously good empirical generalization with high predictive value. Okay, so it's coherent and it has great predictive value. At any rate, so they hang in there. They try and do the best they can. They pump in a little bit of spending, take out a little bit of spending, hope that something works. In this situation, in this real collapse of Keynesian, I mean, Keynesian theory had a lot of weaknesses before. Ever since Modigliani's first equations, it became evident that it assumes that wage rates are fixed downward, which nobody really realized before. But a practical political collapse is much more important, unfortunately, in real life than theoretical collapse. So with this political collapse, Keynesianism, I say, was really bankrupt, and this begins to dissolve the ruling hegemonic paradigm, and people looking around for other answers. Next year, Hayek gets the Nobel Prize, and one of the interesting, in tandem, of course, with left-wing socialist Gunnar Myrdal. It's not to make it too terrible and reactionary. And the interesting thing, this is a big shockaroo to the economics profession. And one thing I want to stress here, I don't want to disillusion any young students here, but economists are almost all of them obsessed with the Nobel Prize. I mean, there's betting pools every in the early fall. Who's going to get it this year? And there's all sorts of stuff going on. Everybody's very interested in the Nobel Prize and who's getting it. Before Hayek, as I remember, all the recipients, almost without exception, were mathematical Keynesian econometric types. And all of a sudden, Hayek gets it. Who the hell is Hayek? Nobody had ever heard of him. See, one of the things about the economics profession, they're not exactly steeped in their own history. I mean, if something's written 10 years ago, nobody knows about it because it's part of the model of physics. If economics is a hard science like physics, which all these people hope and think it is, then physicists don't read 1930s physics unless they're antiquarians or interested in what Einstein did or something. Basically, you read the latest journal articles, the latest textbooks, and that's it. You don't worry about what some bozo thought 20 years ago. And so trying to make this the paradigm in economics results in tremendous loss of knowledge on the part of most economists. So who's Hayek? How did this guy get the Nobel Prize? Who is he? And then it becomes a resurgence because people look back, they want to find out what did he say that earned him the Nobel Prize, and well, this is interesting, I never heard of this. So with this research, unfortunately, some of us conspiracy theorists, this is, of course, a totally unproved hypothesis. It's been cherished by many. I don't necessarily hold it, but some of my friends do, is that the point is that Hayek got his Nobel Prize not for this later stuff, not for evolution and the rule of law and that sort of thing. He got it for his Misesian business cycle theory, which he had expounded and elaborated in late 1920s and early 1930s. That's what he got it for explicitly. So the conspiracy hypothesis is that they waited for Mises to die before they gave Hayek the Nobel Prize, because Mises died in 73, Hayek gets it in 74, and they would never give a Nobel Prize to a monster like Mises, so they waited till Mises to die to give it to Hayek, who's much more of a compromiser. If you read his Constitution of Liberty, for example, there's pro-planning stuff, pro-status stuff all over it. So at that point, this sort of sparked a regeneration, a revival of Austrian economics. It might not be a total causal connection, but certainly is an impressive coincidence that the first Austrian seminar since Old Austria occurred, a week-long conference occurred in Royalton, Vermont in summer of 74. Well, all the younger and whatever Austrians there were gathered together. It was a wonderful thing because we all met each other for the first time, mostly. What, you're an Austrian? Well, fantastic. It's just like saying the catacombs. And Austrianism flourished, of course, it was a shame that Mises didn't live to see this, and after fighting all his life for these ideas. And then we had annual conferences for several years after that. It was a big flourishing movement, and Austrianism was becoming known and widely interested. People were widely interested in England and the United States. And then something happens. The light suddenly goes out. See, the history of thought and history in general is not an onward and upward into the light. It's a series of glitches. It's sort of like I wouldn't say a business cycle, but ups and downs, a zigzag effect. So suddenly there was a big zag after this impressive zig of the late 70s. Something happened, and the younger Austrians at the time started saying, well, the trouble with Mises is he's too dogmatic, too uncompromising, too extreme. How do you get respectable in the mainstream of economics if you keep pushing these ideas that nobody really likes? And we should try to become respectable. We should drop all this stuff about praxeology and laissez-faire and talk about market process, whatever. And the dread name Mises begins to slip out of sight. And this is of course really replicating in death what Mises had suffered in his life, except this time it was essentially a stab in the back by people who would call themselves Misesians, who understood the situation and then basically sold out, if you look at it very bluntly, sold out for potential respectability funds, mainstream publications, tenure, and all the rest of it. Well, in this rather dire situation, and it's not an accident, by the way, that the funding sources, almost a single funding source for this whole revived Austrian movement in the late 70s, which was flourishing very nicely, was one person, one billionaire. And the billionaire had a paradigm shift in his head, and all the other acolytes, so to speak, or fundees by the billionaire, suddenly and coincidentally shifted with it. Into this idea and we began to hear, as I say, not only that Mises was too extreme and too dogmatic, talk about him, began to talk about synthesis with Marxists. This is the late development since 1980 or so. It's important for Austrians to really have to understand the great contributions of Marx and Lenin and so forth, and we should have a continuing dialogue. I'm sure Yuri would appreciate this. And flight from the Soviet Union to come to the United States or Austrians and find out, hey, we should have a synthesis with Marxists, right? Let's join in. Or a synthesis with nihilism, and there's no truth, how do we know anything is true, and all sort of fashionable philosophic guff, Marxo-Freudian nihilist guff from the continent. And this was becoming the ruling paradigm because the billionaire funder was in favor of it, basically. I mean, I don't want to have a simplistic monocausal analysis here, but that's the way it looks to me. In this situation, in this rather pretty grim and depressing situation where Austrianism has really collapsed, because Austrianism, as I said in the last week, is really Misesianism. In this situation, one person decided to do something about it. And this person is Llewellyn Rockwell, who's responsible for everything we have today. Well, Lew had been, all these other people, the Austro-Marxists, or whatever you want to call them, were moving to Washington. They liked Washington. They thought this is where the power is. This is where you can get goodies and respectability. Lew had spent a lot of time in Washington, hated it, wanted to get out, both spiritually and physically. Okay? And he decided that he wanted to found the Mises Institute, which was the dream of his life, and he decided this is the time to do it. And he wanted to revive the Misesian paradigm, the name of Mises, and all the rest of it. And he went to the aforesaid billionaire, and he thought was a Misesian, and he said, well, I want to found a Mises Institute. And he was ordered not to do it. Kind of interesting point here. How could he be ordered since he wasn't an employee of this person? He was ordered not to do it. You can't do it. Of course, Lew, if you know Lew at all, doesn't accept these kind of orders very neatly. So Lew went ahead with no donations, no endowment, no pledges, no big daddy billionaire, I mean, nothing. Just an idea and tremendous energy and organizational genius, entrepreneurial genius of the highest order. And as a result, we have all this today. We have a fantastic Mises Institute.